fantasy short stories. Of Monsters and Mushrooms by Lesley Herron. Chapter 4, Gummy Bears. It was, in fact, not the best day ever. Or at least Eric didn't think so as he held the bridge of his nose.
Do we have to?
Yes. Brig gave Eric a serious look.
Listen, there are 3 things in this world that Attilla loves. Guns, girls, gadgets. And not even in that order. This place has at least 2 of those things, and with advertising like that?
He gestured with a meaty finger to the sign above his head.
Trust me, he's gonna be in there.
They had spent the remainder of their afternoon checking each of the many, many bars, taverns, and, Eric grimaced, brothels of Guttertown. But not in search of Vel, no. No, they had been hunting for that lanky merc ever since he failed to show up at the agreed-upon meeting spot 3 hours ago. Eric looked up at the animated neon sign for the 3rd time, sighing. It was artistically designed to resemble a voluptuous bosom, bouncing up and down as the lights shifted. He swallowed the bile rising in the back of his throat with an audible gulp.
But do we have to? I mean, won't he come out on his own if he's in there?
He wasn't uncomfortable, so to say, in these establishments. He just felt them to be unhygienic and expensive. A 4-armed wolfman stood outside the entrance to the Bouncing Jug, acting as, well, the bouncer, accepting payment for those entering and shoving out the drunk, handsy patrons. He approached his stocky bodyguard, cautiously removing the wallet from his back pocket.
This place has a cover charge.
Eric let out a pathetic sigh.
And I'm running low on funds, seeing as how you needed to sample the bar food at every stop. I had to keep up my energy.
Brig let out a huff.
Do you have any idea how many calories I burn just to maintain this size?
He flexed his overlarge muscles, straining the integrity of his suspenders.
It ain't easy being this pretty. Besides...
Brig caught the attention of the curvaceous woman who stood next to the bouncer, handing out flyers, and he tossed her a wink.
Your brother is probably in there, too.
He lifted his shoulders.
I know I would be if I were him.
Eric shifted his attention up to the Bouncing Neon Fun Bags sign and perked out a laugh.
Yeah, no.
He shook his head lightly.
I can absolutely guarantee you my brother is not in there.
Grabbing a fistful of the doctor's overshirt, Brig dragged the man towards the steps and slapped on his biggest, whitest, bushiest mustache smile for the bouncer.
Well, if that's the case, after we get Attilla, we can check the joint across the street.
Eric chanced to glance over his shoulder to see a similar brothel, down to the worker handing out flyers and a 4-armed wolfman standing guard over the door. But where the Bouncing Jug was bathed in alluring red light, he pulled a face, the Rising Python was tempting in patrons with a green aura the same shade as money.
Yeah, no, he's definitely not in there either.
He groaned as he pulled a holographic plastic card from his wallet. But before the doc could secure their entry, a second bulky wolf tossed a drunkard down the steps to land in the dirt at Brig's feet, and a smug smile crept slowly across his face. He shot a look to Eric, gesturing down at the alcohol-drenched beanstalk, green poncho, and floppy hat askew.
What did I tell you?
His own smile preceded the shake of his head as Eric exchanged glances to his bodyguard and the figure the mighty man presumed to be Attilla.
How dare you toss me out like trash?
The person climbed to their feet, brushing off the front of their outfit. It was in that moment Brig realized,
That's not Attilla.
She had dark indigo skin with glowing pink eyes, and although she shared a strikingly similar lack of fashion sense with his cohort, one thing was obviously different. She was barefoot. Before either one of them had the good sense to ask the mystery woman about their missing merc, she plucked up a scattering of playing cards, all aces, and stomped off, grumbling about cheating scum. For a split second, Eric wondered if they could just exchange Attilla for this barefoot version, then sighed in resignation and handed his credit chit to the wolf. As chaotic as the streets were in this under-armpit, pun intended, of society, the interior of the Bouncing Jug was deceptively calm and clean. That is to say, the grimy surfaces appeared to be dusted regularly, and the smell came from ample perfume and cigarettes, rather than sewage and smog. The roar of hustle and bustle had been replaced with drunken guffaws and lewd catcalls. 24+ chairs circled small tables, each one filled with a patron and their company for the evening. Women of all shapes, sizes, and races walked, danced, or lounged on just about every surface, a fact that caused Eric to grimace as other patrons enjoyed small meals off those same tables. So unhygienic. At the center of the brothel, and garnering attention, stood a massive, glowing stage where scantily clad performers vied for the attention of several money-waving patrons. Loitering about the second floor, employees in varying stages of undress pointed out customers, gossiped with one another, laughed, and passed around their smokes. Eric followed their gestures to see a massive poker table squeezed between the bar and the stage, each chair occupied by an eclectic assortment of players. Looming large at the head of the table, surrounded by 2 naked workers, was another wolfman. No, woman. She was dressed in a tight little red number that could hardly contain her double-decker assets. One hand held up a fan of cards, one adjusted said assets, while the other 2 supplied her with drink and puffs of her cigarette. To her right, a great black-furred minotaur snorted out plumes of heated breath through his nose, his tiny eyes shifting from the others around him, the patrons moving about the bar and down to his own hand. The gaggle of catwomen tittering on his other side, whispering about their own cards, probably didn't help his concentration any. And there, smack dab in the middle of more inhuman card sharks than you could shake a pistol at, sat Attilla, soaking up the limelight. He had his legs stretched out across the wolf lady's lap, belching loudly as he downed another shot glass of amber liquid. Eric frowned as, barely hiding his hand from the other players, Attilla continually dove into a burlap sack of what looked like gummy bears. He let out a grumble and stepped forward, fingers itching to haul that lanky merc out by his giant ears, when he noticed his bodyguard had wandered off. He spun, spotting Brig following a thick pair of thunder thighs that belonged to a gorgeous, crystal-skinned woman who wiggled a finger at him alluringly.
"Ma'am?"
Brig removed his top hat, a deep flush heating his own cheeks. She giggled at him and motioned to the nearest staircase with a lift of her brow and a tilt of her head.
Ahem!
Eric marched between the burly man and the lady of the night, snapping his fingers angrily.
"Focus! We're not here to sample the menu. Speak for yourself."
Brig's smile turned dumb.
"I could eat."
Wailing in frustration, Eric hauled on the merc. Tiny though he was, mountains were more movable, forcing him in the direction of their missing companion.
Oh!
Attilla, recognizing the struggling pair, waved.
Hey, guys! What took you so long? I was worried you'd never find me.
He dropped his voice. Kinda hoped for it, too.
"Friends of yours?"
The wolf woman's words were thick and deep, pulling Brig from his lustful daze and snapped back to the moment. Attila's fondness for sultry accents never failed to land them in trouble, and hers was dripping with a sinister edge. He sputtered, turning his attention to his buddy.
Have you been here this whole time, just gambling?
His eyes darted to the large burlap sack.
And exceeding your sugar limit? You know how you get when you're hopped up on candy.
They're sugar-free.
Attilla waved off the stout merc as he shifted his legs from the madam's lap to prop them on the table. He grinned, turning that dismissive gesture into one that showcased his new boots, wiggling them to highlight the gold spurs attached to both heels. Rubbing his hand across his mustache, Brig grumbled out,
"Nice toe holsters,"
as he took in the pile of winnings heaped around the merc. Judging by the death glares from the rest of the table, Attilla had definitely been on a hot streak, artificial or otherwise. And if the slur in his buddy's words told him anything, it was only a matter of time before the spinach hit the fan.
Lady Lola, Finn, Tabby triplets, this here is my bestest friend in the whole world, Brig.
He waved slightly, barely managing to bite back on the hiccup that threatened to rattle him.
He's just a little guy, but he can pack a punch.
The wolf lady, the minotaur, and the gaggle of cat girls all glanced Brig's way with narrowed eyes.
Oh, and the weird guy beside him is what is he? Our hostage, intern, coerced coworker?
Attilla shrugged.
I don't know what to call him, but his name is Eric.
Lady Lola gave him a slow blink.
Charmed, I'm sure.
Intern? Frowning, Eric crossed his arms. Obviously he was their boss, but whatever. Brig shoved his meaty hands against his hips.
You was supposed to meet us by the clock tower hours ago. Now we've wasted an entire day and are no closer to finding our missing friend.
Slapping a hand on the side of his mouth, Attilla managed a barely hushed stage whisper.
Relax. I dipped into the old noodle juice and found out this is the fastest way to find his bro.
He straightened up, dropping his feet to the floor, and threw on a wicked grin.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a game to win.
Sliding his winning hand of cards across the felt surface, Attilla looked up, that grin never leaving his face.
Read 'em and weep, boys and ladies.
He pulled another handful of gummies, his hard-earned winnings from a weasel of a man with a drawn-on mustache, into his mouth with a victorious chortle. He chewed noisily for several seconds before licking his lips at the sight of this round's pot. Jewels, weapons, gold nuggets, casings, and the undergarments from the two naked gals draped across Lady Lola's shoulders. But the real prize, and why he'd pulled out the big guns, a Trim-O-Matic manicure set shined at the top of that glittering pile. He had no idea what he'd do with them, but their potential was limitless, and Attilla had always been a sucker for a good gadget. He reached down, ready to scoop the treasure trove his way, when the Minotaur slammed his fist down on the table, rattling their poker chips, dislodging the goodie pile, and toppling his bag of candy.
No! My gummies!
You filthy cheat!
Finn, the Minotaur, bellowed as he jumped to his feet, sending the Tabby triplets screaming and hissing into the rafters with an impressive acrobatic display of feline prowess. Gasping, Attilla placed his hand on his chest in mock insult.
Good sir, how could you say that? I've never cheated a day in my life. Just ask my friends there.
Oh, this place has rafters.
Brig pointed up, inviting Eric to do the same.
Very interesting. No, you are filthy cheat.
Finn repeated his insult, slamming his own cards down on the table to reveal 3 aces. He then pointed a giant finger to the merc's winning hand. which included 4 ace of hearts.
7 aces?
Uh-oh. Lady Lola shooed away the women on her back and straightened up.
You sweet-talk your way into my establishment.
She set down her glass and cigarette.
You harass my girls.
She stood.
You drink my alcohol.
She laid out her cards, revealing a royal flush, including yet another ace.
And you have the nerve to cheat me?
She narrowed her eyes.
I have castrated men for less.
Realizing the jig was up, Attilla shakily climbed to his feet with a nervous laugh. What's a little fun between friends, right? His attention shifted quickly between the angry bull and the madam of the brothel, his hands going up into a placating gesture. But Veronica mistook that as him needing assistance, and yet another ace shot out into his hand. The resulting chaos exploded in an uproar of shouting, curses, panties flying through the air, and scattered poker chips. Hidden pistols sprung out of sleeves, and shotgun blasts sent ceiling tiles to meet their makers. Snatching his coveted bag of sugar-free sweets, Attilla wobbled in the direction of the door, stumbling over chairs and terrified patrons. And as quickly as the pandemonium broke out, silence befell the brothel, save for Attilla, who was now clutched in the grip of 4 overlarge wolfmen. They each had a firm grip on one of his limbs, allowing him only the movement of his head, which he turned to watch the winnings on the table being divided amongst the remaining players. And Lady Lola shoved the Trim-O-Matic manicure set back into her bag. He struggled to break free, but the muscles that carried him were so large they could have had their own zip codes. Oh well. Attilla would mourn the loss of such a neat contraption later, as his thoughts zeroed in on the only thing he'd managed to purloin, and a secret smile turned up in the corners of his lips. Least I got my gummies. He kicked out his feet, silently chuckling to himself at the fun little jingling noise the spurs made. And these cool boots. Brig could count the number of times his buddy had landed them both in trouble. Not that he ever would. It would take too long. But each instance was burned into his brain. This time really took the cake, however.
Cake.
Brig shook his head.
Dang it.
He wouldn't be so hungry or distracted if Attilla hadn't screwed them over so bad. He and the doctor had followed the procession of chiseled wolfmen and their trussed-up card shark all the way to the marble steps that led into the lobby of that downed skyscraper, only to be told that the keep master was gone for the night and they'd have to wait until next morning to come back and plead their case. Today tested Brig's patience. Who wakes up at 7 in the morning? Him, apparently, despite his best efforts to squeeze in a few hours more shut-eye. Attilla could also do with more thinking time, he had argued. But no. Eric dragged him out of bed, adamant they be the first to arrive. But that wasn't what upset him. No. Everything else that happened between those two events had gnawed at Brig's nerves, namely the smallness of it all. Being a vertically challenged man himself, never too ashamed to admit it, even he found their accommodations diminutive. The cramped shoebox of a motel, the tiny cot that smelled of dog, the meager breakfast that had been less filling than 3 days of moldy jerky, and the 30-second shower that had gone from scalding to Arctic faster than he could lather shampoo on his smooth scalp. The doctor had blamed their bare-bones lodging on his dwindling funds, but Brig could recognize a stingy man when he saw one. And now he stood, cramped in an elevator with 13 other people and the strong, potent smell of delicious, hot coffee and donuts. Brig's mouth watered, and he forced himself to focus on something else. The dinging of the floors that preceded a short announcement proved distraction enough.
Bing bong, floor 12, tax revenue and suburban development.
Several of the other patrons stepped off the floor like a shuffling trio of zombies, sipping their steaming coffees with blurry eyes. They continued in this fashion, stopping at each floor, heralded by that sickeningly polite voice. After floor 17, 20 minutes into their ascent, Brig and Eric were alone, and judging by the tense silence that stagnated between them, the doctor seemed just as excited to be here as he was. Ding, ding. Eric watched the numbers above the door slowly climb, and all his tired mind could do was circle the drain of, where the hell is my brother? And how far behind will this stupid side venture put us?
Bing bong, floor 32, General Misconduct Office and Law Enforcement Compulsory Visitor Suites.
Brig frowned.
Compulsory visitor suites.
Grumbling, Eric stepped off, turning to the giant merc behind him.
Come on, let's get this over with. I don't want to waste any more time on the guy who isn't missing. That name, though, sounds awful fancy for...
Brig paused as a set of glass doors opened in front of them, pulled wide by a valet in navy blue. Waved inside by a white-gloved hand and a cheerful smile, he complied with more than a little apprehension.
I'm confused. I thought this was the jail.
Eric shrugged.
That's what the guy on the first floor told me.
They stepped into a giant foyer, illuminated by a glittering crystal chandelier, each shard made from different colored glass. Marble pillars rose from a sea of spotless tile and plush carpets. A red velvet runner ran the length from the door to the desk, and plush chase lounges stood every 10 feet. He scratched at his mustache.
You sure this ain't a fancy hotel? 'Cause that's what it looks like.
The man who sat behind the rotunda smiled and waved them closer.
Welcome, welcome. What can I do for you gentlemen this fine morning?
His voice was exactly what you would imagine from the concierge of a snazzy joint like this. Brig, still stunned by the apparent lavishness that surrounded him, failed to form any coherent words.
Our friend was arrested last night, and we were told to come back today.
Eric stepped forward.
They most likely tossed him in the drunk tank.
The name badge on the man's chest read Milo.
Can you help us?
Milo plastered on a too-fake smile as he made a shushing gesture with one hand.
Please, we ask for the sake of those around you, you don't say drunk or tank in the lobby.
The pair looked around at the shockingly empty room. Milo leaned back, opening a massive book that thudded against the counter, rattling the pen cup.
What was your friend's name?
Taken aback by the size of the tome, it had to weigh at least 30 pounds, Eric stammered back to the moment.
Attilla.
The man skimmed through the most recent pages, running his finger across a line of names before it stopped near the bottom.
Yes, here.
Milo tapped at the bell to his left, and, after staring at them pleasantly, just long enough for it to get awkward, a large, towering black man dressed in an olive-green police uniform emerged from a nondescript door. Milo smiled at the pair standing before them.
Gentlemen, this is Frankie.
He waved to the giant man.
Please take these two to see your most recent acquisitions.
Acquisitions?
We don't like to use the word prisoner around here. It tarnishes our image.
Milo whispered this, as if speaking any louder might incur some wrath. Frankie spun on his heel, heading towards the door he entered from.
Let's go, boys. I've got a busy day ahead of me.
Eric made to lurch into motion when a meaty hand at his side stayed him. He looked down.
What's wrong?
Narrowing his own eyes at the large man, Brig's mustache twitched nervously.
Something feels off here. This place is, well, it ain't like no prison I've ever been in, and I've been in plenty.
He took a hearty sniff.
It's too clean. Smells like trouble.
Milo snapped the book closed with a loud crack that echoed into the empty silence, belting out a forced laugh as he leaned in and whispered sharply, in a completely different accent,
"Are you trying to get us all killed? Just play along and follow the nice man."
Rolling his eyes, Eric tugged his arm free.
Whatever. Yes, it's weird. But do you want your friend back or not?
With a trepidatious grunt, Brig fell in behind the guard, who, let's face it, was taller than Attilla and wider than him. They followed the colossal man into a narrow, dull gray hallway, through another door, down another bland passage, until eventually the three of them stepped out into what he imagined a jail should look like. Hard stone floors, drab and mildew-covered walls, harsh iron bars over the giant openings into tightly packed rooms. He could feel the tension leave his shoulders.
Now this is more like it. What's with the fancy-schmancy facade?
Frankie grunted.
The madam is obsessed with appearances.
The guard continued on without further explanation, forcing them to follow along in silence. They walked past several empty cells, each one just large enough for a bed, devoid of linens or sheets, and a bucket. The smell slapped Eric first, and he paused, bracing his nose with his hand. Ignoring the exaggerated dry heaving that came from his traveling companion was another story. In that moment, the anger Brig felt over last night's lodging evaporated. Things could have been worse. Much worse. The massive guard led them up to a large desk, illuminated by a gold and evergreen lamp. He stepped behind it and slumped down into his chair, flipping open a regular-sized book.
Your friend is in Suite 9.
His deep timbre voice resonated off the high ceilings, breaking through the hushed silence.
And,
Brig paused, swallowing another gag on the putrid air.
How long is he here for?
Fat fingers slid across scribbled lines on the page, and Frankie mulled over the answer for several moments before responding,
2 months. He's lucky. Lady Lola didn't consider him a big enough threat to encourage the madam to come down harder on him.
That's what she said.
Attila's voice rang out through the empty foyer from one of the cells down the hall, and Brig groaned.
Is there any way we can, grease the wheels of his release?
Frankie looked left, then right, then back at the pair before him.
I could consider looking the other way, for a small fee.
A bright smile overtook his face.
I've had my eye on a new hairbrush.
Brig glanced up at the guard's equally bald head and hid his confusion with a carefully timed elbow in the doctor's side. Groaning, Eric stepped forward, withdrawing his wallet. That grumble turned into a sigh as he opened the flap, half expecting a fly to buzz free. Instead, he pulled out a different holographic card and tapped it on the counter.
Should be enough credits on there.
As the two haggled over price, Brig approached Suite 9 and could only shake his head at the sight of his buddy lounged across the bed and bouncing a foot in the air, his new spurs jingling noisily. The sight of that alone made him angry, but realizing he had just found the source of the pungent dungeon aroma whisked away all other emotions.
Oh my God! Oh, Attilla, what?
He gagged.
What is that smell? The idiot ate a 5-pound bag of gummy bears.
A rough voice in the next cell over responded, a smile evident on the words.
Sugar-free ones.
A dark chuckle followed, like cascading gravel. Brig covered his face with a hand, groaning at the near-toxic sight of the bucket splattered with a rainbow of confectionery colors.
Damn it, Attilla. I'm starting to agree with the doctor.
He kicked angrily at the bars.
How is this supposed to help us?
Relax. I told you last night. This is how we find our doc's missing bro.
He sat up, tapping the side of his head.
Even I don't understand how, but have I steered you wrong yet?
Plenty of times.
Briggs sighed, then remembered he was trying not to breathe. It was true, though. When Attilla said he knew something would happen, he knew.
We're working on getting you out. How you holding up?
I've had worse nights.
Speak for yourself.
That voice spoke like a battle-hardened man attempting to block the horrors he'd lived through.
My new friend and I played Would You Rather until my stomach made it hard to hear each other.
Attilla wavered his hand.
But all in all, I'd call the night a win. I got to keep the boots.
He reached down, spinning the wheel on one of the spurs.
I like him, don't you?
He's your friend. You can't murder him. At least not with all these witnesses.
Briggs' grip on the bars were tight enough that he was sure he felt the iron buckle beneath his fingers. Thankfully, the doctor and Frankie approached before he reached through to strangle him. The guard slid a rusty key into the lock on the door, and with a twist here, a turn there, it popped open with a squeak.
Go on, get out of here before my boss comes back.
Frankie pointed to the corridor further into the prison.
And take the stairs out. I don't want to answer any of Milo's stupid questions.
Jumping to his feet, the spurs jingling happily, Attilla bounded through the open door before the giant man could change his mind. He smiled, took 2 steps forward, and then stopped.
Hang on, I gotta do something.
Briggs' mustache twitched. Swiveling on his glorious boot heels, Attilla approached the cell next to his and pulled a mostly empty sack from the folds of his poncho.
It was nice meeting you, roomie. Here, I want you to have the rest of my gummies.
A metal arm reached through the bars, but not to take the sack. Instead, he just shook the merc's free hand.
Yeah, no thanks.
The man stepped back.
Frankie, open a window. It smells like a donut shop exploded in the sewer.
Eric, who had been too caught up in his dwindling lack of funds to pay attention to anything happening in front of him, paused as he caught sight of the retreating metal limb. He leaned around the pillar and curiously gazed into the darkened interior of Suite 10.
Vel?
Thank you for listening to Of Monsters and Mushrooms, the rewrite of Book 1 by Lesley Herron. Join us as we post new chapters roughly every other week. If you would like to listen to the entire book or her other novels in the series, you can do so at talltaletv.com/series or by using the link in the description.
Okay. Would you rather have a turnip for a head or potatoes for feet?
I'd have to go with potatoes for feet.
Agreed. And if they got dirty, you could always call them mud spuds. Okay. Your turn.
All right. Would you rather wear wet socks for a month or constantly find rocks in your shoes for a whole week?
Oh, man. I'm gonna have to go with the rocks. Wet socks would wreak havoc on my toenail fungus.
Yeah, good call.
Okay.
Hey, you might want to ease up on those gummies.
Don't worry. They're sugar-free. Would you rather eat used chewing gum off a parking meter or a smoothie made from everything stuck beneath a couch cushion?
Is the chewing gum hard or still sticky?
It's still...
You okay?
Yeah, it's still stick. Oh, God. Oh,
Guard, quick! Open a window!
oh God, yeah.
Would you rather eat more gummies or...